I won't use the word calories because that word is idiotic. It's a unit of heat measurement. That's like saying how many degrees Fahrenheit are you eating today?
When I hear these hot, polarizing words, these things that evoke emotion, to say calories are idiotic, I generally see that as a red flag in an information source. Calories determine your body weight, macronutrients determine your body composition, micronutrients determine your performance. So to say calories are flat out wrong is just incorrect, and we have thousands of pieces of literature to contest that.
That's why you can't just write off what somebody says when you hear something. It's just truth can be found everywhere.
I believe when you clean out the gunk in your physical body, you make a clear mind through diet, exercise, and sleep. Your purpose, your path, your passions, they all become more clear. Fitness should only add value to your existence, not detract.
Absolutely.
No one could maintain 2 workouts a day, reading a book a month, and no junk food. That's not realistic. People want the explosion, but they don't think about, well, what happens when the explosion and the dust settles?
Yep.
You got to keep going.
The bad news is it's going to require work.
Yeah.
So if you're watching this, listening to this, and you're feeling frustrated with these types of things, the number one piece of advice that I give to people is like, what's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Travis Makes Friends podcast. Today, I'm making friends with Michael Smoak. Michael, what's up, dude? Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me, man. This is an honor. I'm glad to be here.
Yeah, of course. It was kind of one of the interesting ways that we got in touch and like became friends, which is pretty atypical, is that we posted a clip from a previous guest of the show, and it went crazy on a couple different platforms, especially even on like my Travis Makes Friends Instagram. It only hit, like, as of today, only has like 1,200 followers. But this clip has like almost 250,000 views now. It was the first time I ever saw comments outpace likes, you know
yeah,
which was an indication, that this is going to like probably pick up some steam. And then shares and saves started going like crazy, and it just started blowing up. But it was funny because I followed I think it was your TikTok account first, just because I liked some of the nutrition stuff that you say. Usually when I'm looking for nutritionists to like follow and learn from, it's kind of Max Lugavere type people where it's like, it's not the one size fits all thing. There's lots of nuance. Everybody's different and things like that. And so I resonated with some of the stuff that you said, and I gave you a follow. And then I noticed that somebody in my comments tagged you and said like, hey, is this true? And you were like, nope. And
I just said nope.
Yeah, exactly. And then I replied to the comment and was like, let's chat about it sometime, which to your, to give you credit for, you were open to having the conversation, which a lot of people, when they see stuff online, they just immediately get turned off and go like, well, this person isn't a good source of information because this one thing is bad, which I got a lot of that in the comment section. It's always funny to me. But you were open to have the conversation, and here we are sitting in Austin recording this in person, able to have some sort of friendship here. So thanks for doing this, man.
Yeah, less than I think 30 days later. I think this all was a pretty quick turnaround. I remember responding nope to the comment, and then you said come on the show, and I just thought, okay, you're going to have an opinion on something. I think it's really important in the industry that I'm in, fitness, when you talk about these topics that have so many creators with very hot or polarizing takes. I think it can be very easy to create an echo chamber for yourself where you only receive feedback of people who agree with you.
Yeah.
And I'm fortunate that my algorithm still shows me a lot of things that I love and agree with, and a lot of things that provoke thought, challenge my beliefs, or that I just flat out don't agree with. And that was something that I, in fact, did flat out disagree with. And it got us here. And you made a great point before the show. You said, I think it's important to have civility around topics you can disagree upon, because I think you said great ideas or correct ideas come from meeting with an incorrect idea. And it's incredibly important to understand that everybody can teach you something. Everybody on earth knows something that you don't, and you should treat them accordingly. And I feel the same way about the doctor you had on. I mean, we may not agree on a lot, but he also had a lot of good points. And so that's what we're here to talk about today.
Yeah. So I'm going to pull up this clip just to give you a chance to respond to this one, because this is the one that like really went crazy. So in my producer role, we'll insert this in the episode too, but here it is.
I won't use the word calories because that word is idiotic. It's a unit of heat measurement. I know everybody uses it. It's totally fucking wrong. That's like saying how many degrees Fahrenheit are you eating today? Like literally we could convert calories to degrees Fahrenheit. Like if I ask that question, you look at me like I had two heads. Yeah. But the way we calculate energy.
Okay. So respond to that one first. And then he says something about protein here too that I'll give you a chance.
Yeah. There's a lot of great information in there. The first thing I'll say is he's a doctor. He has credentials. He's obviously got the physical experience, I think, to look a certain way, of which Dr. John, correct?
Mm-hmm.
He looks great. He's in incredible physical shape and has a lot of good takes. I looked into his content too, and he prioritizes the importance of red meat, which I'm a huge proponent of. However, when I hear these hot, polarizing words, these things that evoke emotion, to say calories are idiotic, It's something you absolutely should not consider.
Totally fucking wrong.
Totally fucking wrong. I generally see that as a red flag in an information source. Dr. Lane Norton is one of the top authorities in the fitness and nutrition space, and he has a great quote that says, if you want to look for an expert in the space, look for people who use vernacular and verbiage such as this may be, or this might be, or it looks like, showing that they're open to the possibility of new research coming out, their minds being changed, and a constantly evolving perspective. I believe things now that I didn't believe a year ago. But I make most of my decisions. I do some interesting, wild, holistic health shit that maybe doesn't make sense. But the majority of my decisions are based on research. And we know in every study that nutrition is consisting of, or that is nutritional dietary approaches are isolated within, calories are also accounted for and isolated within the study as well. So it is not completely fucking wrong, as he says, to value caloric intake. And we can quickly point to the study from Dr. Mark Hobb, the Twinkie diet study, that you may have heard of, where a professor, I think he was at Indiana at the time, don't quote me on that, Dr. Mark Hobb, over the course of 10 weeks, to effectively use himself as a lab rat and test the law of thermodynamics and the calories in, calories out equation, ate Twinkies and Oreos and Doritos every 3 hours, alongside a few protein shakes to hit his minimum protein requirement. But that was it. He ate 1,800 calories a day for 10 weeks.
I'm on board so far.
So far, so good, right? He ate 1,800 calories for 10 weeks, consisting of almost 95% junk food. Over the course of that 10 weeks, Dr. Hobb lost 27 pounds, improved his HDL, lowered his LDL, which is an improvement in LDL, and lowered his triglycerides. All of his HbA1c improved. All of his major inflammatory and health markers, which is something that Dr. John alludes to a lot, is this buzzword inflammation that nobody really understands when people say it. All of his major health markers improved, and he lost body weight. It's a great example, and there are thousands of others of peer-reviewed studies that calories in, calories out truly is the way in which we change our body weight. Now, would you feel like shit eating Twinkies, Oreos, and Doritos?
I was just going to say that. I can't imagine what you'd wake up feeling 100%. Like every morning. Yeah.
You'd be hungry, you'd be tired, you'd be lethargic, but you would lose body weight. Calories determine your body weight. Macronutrients determine your body composition. Micronutrients determine your performance.
Let's say that one more time.
Calories determine your body weight. Macronutrients determine your body composition. What is muscle? What is fat? Your lean tissue versus fat tissue. Micronutrients, your vitamins and minerals. That will determine how you feel and how you operate and how you really optimize things. So to say calories are flat out wrong is just incorrect. And we have thousands of pieces of literature to contest that.
Yeah. And even if it, like my thing on this is that even if it were completely correct to say that, like from a, scientific standpoint, it's like, well, how are we going to measure it then? Like we gotta put some sort of objective measurement there to try to even understand what we're putting in our body. So even if it was like a, whatever, like he's saying, like a heat measurement or whatever, it's like, okay, so, it's all energy. Like we have to figure out a way to measure these things so that we know what to put in our body and what not to put in our body, because it will have an effect on what our weight's going to be at the end of the day, regardless.
Bingo. I mean,
what name you put on it.
Right. You and I are both wearing watches. The sun's going to rise and set whether we create time or not. Men created time as a way to prioritize their days.
To measure it.
Yes, to measure it, right? We need a thing to measure the thing. Right. And so while what he said about heat and calories and what a calorie really is partially true, it's a bit of a cherry pick and a misconstruing of the data and the concepts, if that makes sense.
It's somewhat irrelevant.
Yes.
By the way, still love you, Dr. John.
Yeah, absolutely. You have some great information.
Here's the second part that a lot of people, and like we took this one clip because it performed so well and used like 6 different variations of this clip. So between like all the different types of clips that we put on TikTok, Instagram, this probably has done a couple million views between all of the platforms with like different things that he said about this. But this next part is another piece that a lot of people disagreed with.
We still count calories from protein, but we shouldn't, because your body has no ability to store protein as body fat, none whatsoever. Which is why when you eat a ton of protein, your body temperature goes up. It's the thermogenic effect of overeating, how much protein your body can use.
Interesting.
But it can't be stored.
Okay. Shall I begin?
Yes.
A lot of truth sprinkled in with a lot of very polarizing language and vernacular, that your body has no ability to store protein as body fat. Is that true? Yes. What he doesn't account for is a process called gluconeogenesis.
Which is a term I learned literally in the comments on this post. Yeah.
So you already see some of the disagreement where I'm heading with this. The fact of the matter is, if I were to eat 2,000 calories a day, if I were to eat 2,000 calories a day and burn 1,500 calories a day, and I was meeting my maximum protein needs Well, the rest of that energy has to go somewhere. If I only needed 150 grams of protein because that's what my body broke down in amino acids, cellular tissue, muscle tissue for my workout, once I max out those needs, that energy has to go somewhere. So if I'm in a 500 calorie surplus, I burned 1,500, I ate 2,000, or 2,000 to 3,000 is more realistic for me, that protein will either be excreted in your urine or your waste, or our body undergoes a process called gluconeogenesis, where we convert amino acids into sugar, carbohydrates, because our brain does need glucose to function. It absolutely is essential for cognitive function. So the liver and kidneys will convert excess amino acids to sugar. And once the glycogen stores in your liver, kidney, or your liver and muscles are full, then the potential for fat storage is there because it's excess energy. There's a reason we carry this stuff around. We need it for starvation, periods of feast and famine. And so he fails to account for that in the research. If you were to just eat 200 grams of protein a day and that maxed out your protein needs at 150, that excess energy has to go somewhere. And there's research to show that that can be stored as body fat. Is it an efficient process? No. Is it less likely? Yes, but it's still possible.
So what he's saying is technically accurate, meaning the protein itself is not stored as body fat.
Technically accurate.
But the protein does get converted into glucose, which then can be stored as fat if it's not exercised out or excreted through urine or something like that.
That's exactly right. Bingo.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the thing is that that's why you can't just write off what somebody says when you hear something. It's just like there's truth. Truth can be found everywhere. But that's part of the whole critical thinking process. It's like that's kind of the problem that I've run into having the show, man, is like if there's ever a sort of like a piece of information that conflicts with somebody's existing worldview, they immediately write off everything that person says, including all of the other pieces of information around that one thing that they didn't like. And if that's the way that you go throughout life, then you are avoiding building the muscle of critical thinking, which will, in my opinion, not be a path that you want to go down. Like if you never flex your critical thinking muscle a little bit, then you will always be dependent on sources of truth that you deem as worthy of paying attention to. So like there was one girl that commented something about and I think of the caption of the post or something, we said like, do you agree or what do you what did you think of this with Dr. Jake, whichever? And she was like, what do we think? We think that you should vet your guests better before you bring them on your show. And I was like, look, I see where you're coming from on that. But first of all, I've had over 1,000 episodes of the show. If you think that I can properly know inside and out what every single guest that I bring onto the show is going to say within an hour-long conversation with them, like you're out of your mind. It's impossible.
It's crazy.
It's literally impossible. But I also believe that it's my job as a host just to allow people to express their opinion. And then I was like, this comment section is a fantastic example of correct ideas interacting with incorrect ideas, because there's a ton of people in the comments that are like other doctors and things like that are providing counterpoints to what he's saying in the clip. But yeah, so I wrote out this whole thing and I said the correct ideas only come from interaction with incorrect ideas. And she goes, well, correct ideas only come from facts. And I was like, see, that's the problem right there, is that you believe that the set of facts that you are operating on are intrinsically and objectively true to their core. And I don't believe that that's true. I believe, and science, by the way, doesn't believe that that's true. That's the whole point of science, is to interrogate things that we hold as truth and ask questions about what we think is true, build hypotheses around what might also be true in addition to this thing, or what could conflict with this thing, and then build experiments to prove or disprove those hypotheses. And then we end up with evolved truth over time. So like if you're not willing to at least interrogate the things that you currently hold as quote unquote facts, then you're going to be operating on those same principles and stuck in a paradigm that does not allow you to shift your belief structure throughout your life, which is not a good way to operate, in my opinion.
Yeah, you cannot teach a man that which he thinks he already knows. Mm-hmm. And I see that in my friendships, relationships. I see that all over. It runs rampant on the internet because of the echo chamber nature of an algorithm and creators blocking anyone who disagrees with them. I welcome disagreement.
Yeah.
Because it's taught me a lot. And if I would have closed myself off to the carnivore community creators, I probably never would have learned about just how nutrient dense red meat is.
Which is a great point, by the way. Sorry to cut you off.
No.
But to again, give Dr. John his flowers here. If you listen to the whole context of the conversation, conversation, that was the context in which this particular clip was taken from, which is that he was basically a kind of more or less attacking people who shit on the carnivore diet. And his broader reason for saying that was to suggest that a heavy, beef type diet will not allow you to overconsume because the calories are dense and you will feel full. Like they're just more satiating calories. So if you're consuming Doritos, that's why you can eat 3 bags of those things and still be hungry later.
Yep.
But if you're, it's difficult to overeat protein was his main point.
And that couldn't be more true.
Yeah, right.
Couldn't be more true, and absolutely something we agree upon. And I felt, as a guy who walks around at a lower level of body fat for performance and aesthetic reasons, your appetite can sometimes be a menace because you don't always, your body doesn't want to keep you shredded. It wants to keep you alive. And for me, it was a powerful addition to focus more on red meat and dietary fat because of its impacts on satiety. The vitamin and mineral content of beef versus chicken is absolutely true. And I think people listening are going to breed the question, well, if Dr. John's wrong and then this guy might be wrong, but he's right about a little bit, how do I know what's true? How do I know what to practice? Ultimately, it comes down to the art and act of discernment.
Yes.
Which, to your point, is critical thinking is an exercise and it is a muscle like anything else that you have to train. And you train it through being open-minded. And if you can't do that and then marrying it with application, I've done carnivore. I did carnivore for 60 days. I did keto for 60 days. I went vegan for only about 2 weeks because I didn't feel good. You have to just take a degree of self-starterism and just become a self-starter and realize, well, I don't know if that's true, but I'm going to try it and see how I feel. And that's so important. And the last thing I'll say about that is Dr. John may be able to find some research that can counteract what I'm saying here. And that's where it gets complicated too. But this is a fact, for every 100 studies on the negative health outcomes of smoking, you could find somewhere between 2 and 6 in that 100 that actually draw a light conclusion that smoking might be good for you. Does that mean you should pick up the Marlboros?
Yeah.
No, it doesn't. It comes back down to your discernment.
Yeah, right. You gotta, the bummer part is it means you're going to have to work a little bit.
Yeah. God forbid.
Yeah. Like we just want, we want somebody else to be like, this is what you should do and make it easy for us. But the bottom line is none of this stuff is easy. It's all simple once you get down to it, but it's not easy because you're going to have to work through what's going to work for you and the profile that you have.
Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about how you got into all this, man. I know you, like just flipping through some of the content and stuff that you post. One of the reasons I ended up following you was that you weren't giving this one size fits all nutrition advice that I think should be questioned very much so. And most of the time it leads to a product or service that you're going to buy. Whenever anybody's giving you like a one size fits all, it's because they have that one size fits all solution. So they're trying to convince you that you're part of the one size fits all problem so that you buy their stuff, right? Like Liver King, for example.
Great example.
It's like this fits into the thing that I sell the most. So I'm going to be the ultimate example of what this looks like. Even if it means that I'm going to lie about being on steroids and pretend that it was just me eating liver and that's why I look like this. So there's multiple paths that you could have taken in this. What got you started down this path initially? Because you weren't always the guy that was in shape.
No, I was overweight for my entire life, really. I mean, my issues with my self-image and my body image go back to being a little kid and not wanting to take my shirt off at the pool and being bullied relentlessly, that I think that probably has an impact on you as a young man, definitely developmentally. I was never really a popular kid, a super in shape kid. I was an okay athlete. I wasn't a great athlete. And I just sort of existed in this limbo. And I always hated the way I looked. And eventually it got to a point where I overheard a friend in another room who didn't know I was there say to my friends, Smoak is looking really big. Smoak being my last name, right? Calling me by my last name. And in that moment, I remember looking down and thinking, okay, people are starting to notice.
Yeah.
I'm not taking care of myself. I'm drinking, I'm smoking, being a normal college kid, but eating like I was a D1 athlete and playing no sports. And to top that off.
Which is fun, by the way.
It was a blast for a little while until I went to the doctor at 21 and he said, your blood pressure is a concern of mine. And I said,
at 21?
I'm 21. And he said, yeah, that's my point. That's my concern. And so it started purely out of vanity with a little bit of fear of health risk, realizing I didn't need to live like a frat star anymore. And throughout that process, I realized how much of my life improved when I got right with my physical body. And I always tell people that ask me now on the platform I have that Where do I start? I'm a kid, or I'm in my mid-20s. I'm in my 30s. I don't even know where to begin. If you're not in your best physical shape, your best physical shape, not the best, start there. I believe when you clean out the gunk in your physical body, you make a clear mind through diet, exercise, and sleep. Your purpose, your path, your passions, they all become more clear. Most people just have too much noise up here, and a lot of it starts with a shitty diet and a sedentary lifestyle.
Yeah.
I loved how I began to show up in rooms with people. I noticed opportunities opening up for me relationally with friends, new groups of people. Then my career, people noticed I was in shape, and that became a topic of conversation. And I just had this a moment of, I think clearer, I make better decisions, people treat me better. This is about way more than abs and biceps. Everything is different through the lens of a physically fit person than when I was drinking, smoking, and sleeping 5 hours a night at 60 pounds overweight. And I became so convicted on it. And I would say now I'm devoted. And I loved it so much, I began to just sort of word vomit to the people in my life about how powerful it is. And it turns out not everybody cares about this stuff as much as I do. Shocker. And so for me, the TikTok page was more of a cathartic release. It was almost a video diary of, look, this is what I did. I only go to the gym 3 times a week. I walk. I eat mostly whole foods, but I will have a cheeseburger or a cocktail, God forbid. And I'm in this shape.
Yeah.
And people were like, no way, he's full of shit.
Bullshit.
Yeah, you have to be in the gym 5 days a week. And I started to realize there was this narrative. People don't get in shape because they think you got to be like a bodybuilder. You got to eat chicken and rice. You got to live in the gym. It's got to be a job. But I love my life. And I think that fitness should only add value to your existence, not detract.
Absolutely.
And so I just started sharing my story and my experience. And one of the hot topics on TikTok was protein intake and how much to get. And I made one video where I talked like a goober called Protein 101. I was just a little bit myself. I'd finally gotten a little bit comfortable with the camera. I think it was my 6th video. Been at it for a month. Posted it, went to bed that night, woke up the next morning, and then I had like 5,000 followers.
Wow.
And I thought, whoa, this is crazy. And it just kept happening and evolved into me quitting my cushy 6-figure corporate job with not a plan in hell of what I was going to do next. And here we are almost 2 years later. I have had the blessing to be able to fulfill what I feel like I might have been put here to do, which is provide a seemingly complex topic in simple terms through my own life experience. And you used the phrase earlier, this stuff is not necessarily easy, but it's simple. That's an accidental catchphrase I seem to have coined. It isn't easy, but it is simple. Don't overcomplicate it.
Yeah.
And that is what I'm trying to teach people, whether it be in career development, public speaking, but ultimately fitness, nutrition, their mindset on life.
As soon as I adopted that belief, that was when my nutrition and body composition changed. So like I grew up an athlete. Basketball was my kind of sport of choice, which is intense cardio constantly.
All the time.
And I never had to worry about what I ate. I just was always somewhat skinny, and I grew a lot in high school, which also made me, elongate my body a little bit and shred some of the little chubby fat that I always had as a kid.
Grew up, didn't grow out.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I grew out.
I was going to say, but then I quickly grew out after I stopped. I got injured junior year of college ball, and then got surgery, and then got married all within like a year. And then I was like 200 when I got married, and then I gained 50 pounds in a year and a half, almost like I was competing to get fat. And then from there, it was just like, I was just like, I gotta be disciplined, right? So I'd do this challenge and that challenge and this 7-day thing and this 75 thing and like super restricting, ultra disciplined. And I would pat myself on the back to be like, so you can be disciplined, And then as soon as the challenge was over, it was back to my old habits, because what I was doing during that challenge was not sustainable. And this is like the one thing that I try to tell people the most is like, the challenges feel good. And sometimes you need it to just like kick you into gear to make you realize what's possible. Because extremity expands capacity. And so sometimes when you go in those extreme, challenges and things like that, you find out what you're capable of, and it changes your definition of what's possible. So they have their place, not trying to vilify that entire concept. However, because I did that for probably 5 years, 6 years beyond that point, I went from 250 down to 200 in another like year and a half after I was 250. And then for the next like 4 or 5 years, I just went from 200 to 225 to 205 to 230 to 202 to 222. And a good weight for me is like 190 to 200. I literally at the time, bro, I sold myself this lie that like it was impossible for me to get down under 200. I was like, it's just not my body composition, my genetics, the way that I'm made. Like I'm not going to get under 200 again. And then I changed that one thing and then try to do it the most simple way that I possibly could. And to your point, which is why I like a lot of the stuff you put out. If most people would simply go for a walk every day, drink more water, get some decent sleep, and prioritize protein, they would drop weight instant. Like within the problem is like you're not going to drop 14 pounds in a week.
Yeah.
You're not, you know what I mean? You're not going to see those results happen overnight. But if you do that for 6 months, not only are you going to see actual results on the scale or in the gym or whatever it is, but it's going to be sustainable because you're building it into a lifestyle that actually makes sense. Like I had a piece of chocolate cake last night. You know what I mean? Like it's not like I just excommunicated all enjoyment from my life because that's what I thought I had to do.
Yeah.
Back then, I thought I thought it was like, oh, it's either be a bodybuilder or be who I am. You know, and I'm not going to be a bodybuilder.
All in, all out.
You know what I mean? That's not my goal in life. I don't want to do that. I still want to enjoy myself. And so I sold myself that lie and I bought into it. And then ultimately they just figured out like, that's not true. There are people who walk around like you. It's like strength train 3 days a week. Other than that, I go for walks. I make sure I eat well 80 to 90% of the time. And sometimes I have a couple beers with my buddies. Sometimes I have some chocolate cake. If I'm at the birthday party, I'm not like, no, I can't have that and I can't have that and I can't touch candy during Halloween and I can't have a cinnamon roll at Christmas or whatever it is. It's like you can make room for all of those things, but you got to have a plan that you stick to. It's just like your finances. You got to have the budget. You got to have the discipline. It doesn't mean you can't go on vacation. It just means that vacation maybe isn't next month. Maybe it's in 12 months from now and you're saving $200 a month so that in 12 months you can take a $2,500 vacation instead of just throwing it on a credit card today and trying to make it work and getting yourself into more debt. So you got to have some sort of a plan to stick to.
No, that's why I'm somewhat anti-75 hard and whole 30 challenges because like you said, people see these dramatic results over a short period of time, then they realize they go from crawling to a dead sprint and you can't maintain a sprint. Mm-hmm. And it's why I love the quote so much from James Clear. We don't rise to the level of our goals. We fall to the level of our systems. Mm-hmm. And I tell people, you don't have a discipline issue. You have a systems issue. Mm-hmm. No one could maintain 2 workouts a day, reading a book a month, and no cheat meals. Cheat meals is another term we could get into, but no junk food. That's not realistic. I go out and I have a few drinks. I eat whatever I want. I just happen to gravitate towards food that makes me feel good because I've found the system that works for me. And that's where sometimes the verbiage that Dr. John used of like, you shouldn't have this, you shouldn't have that, can be hard for people because some people can do carnivore for the rest of their life. Mm-hmm. That's the system that works for them and allows them to rise to their goals. For someone like me, I have a very simple rule I tell my coaching clients and everybody on the internet. If it grew in the ground, it grew on a tree, or it had a mom and dad, make that 90% of your diet. The rest, whatever. You will be all right if you do those things. But that boring, unsexy advice of walking, water, protein, and the gym 3 hours a week, you can't package that and sell it. It's not sexy.
Right.
And so you have to get people excited about the monotonous and get them to understand. And so much of this, like you just said, is a narrative that we tell ourselves, a story we tell ourselves. It's a lie that I can't do this. I can't get under 200 pounds again. No, you just haven't found the system that works for you. But if you can accept that, I'm a big aphorisms guy. I fucking love Hormozy and Williamson and those guys. And Hormozy has another quote I think about every day. 90% of success can be boiled down to doing the obvious thing for an extraordinary period of time without convincing yourself you're smarter than you are. And everybody knows the obvious things. They just aren't willing to do that because it requires delayed gratification. It requires a little bit of action every day and not monumental, iconic action for a short period of time. People want the explosion, but they don't think about, well, what happens when the explosion and the dust settles? You got to keep going. And that's where I try to help people find systems that work for them. And it's not carnivore, it's not vegan, it's not paleo, it's probably somewhere in between all of it for most people.
Yeah. The bad news is it's going to require work.
Yeah.
And sometimes it requires a level of honesty about who you are and the decisions that you make that most people don't want to face. It all boils down to personal responsibility at the end of the day. And like I said, for me at the time, it was like, I wanted to blame it on my genetics. And do genetics play a factor? Of course they do. I'm not going to pretend. Like, my wife's a great example. My wife and I have a very similar diet because we live together, and she has a bigger sweet tooth than I have. But even like she's had our kids, 2 kids, and she's walking around basically a 6-pack all the time. And at the time it was so frustrating for me because I was like, I see what you're eating and I see what I'm eating and I see what you look like and I see what I look like. And I was just like, genetics, you know what I mean? But I wasn't willing to get brutally honest with myself and be like, okay, what is it really though? And so again, do the math. So if you're watching this, listening to this, and you're feeling frustrated with these types of things, the number one piece of advice that I give to people is like, change absolutely nothing about what you're doing right now. Change nothing. This is the easiest path. Change nothing. The only thing I want you to do is track every calorie you put into your mouth for the next 30 days. That's it. Get MyFitnessPal or one of these other tools and track the number of calories you put in your mouth. The key is it has to be every single one. It can't not include the handful of fries that you stole from your wife's plate, or the, dinosaur chicken nugget you pulled off of your kids, dinner, at that night. Like it cannot like just not include dipping sauces because like, whatever. It can't not include drinking calories because those calories don't matter. They're liquids. You know what I mean? It does not matter. Every single calorie you put in your mouth. And that's what I did for that. That was what made me realize like, oh, there's the calories. There's the difference. I'm eating well all day, but I had like that. The BLTs, right? The bites, licks, and tastes
I've never
that
heard
you do,
that. That's great.
Throughout the day. That just like they add up, man. Like that handful of fries dipped in ketchup. It's like, well, there's 130 calories. You know what I mean? That those 7 chips that you ate, there's another 75 calories. You add that up, and it's like if you're right at that distance, right on that line of calories in versus calories out. It's like the bottom line is if you consume fewer calories than you spend, you will lose weight. Bingo. If you consume more calories, then you will gain weight. And so if you're riding that line and you're looking at your meals and you're like, man, I only consumed, 2,200 calories, and I know that I know I could consume 2,500 because I got my workout in today. My basal metabolic rate is 2,000, whatever. You know what I mean? It's like, well, I'm 300 calories under. Why am I still gaining weight? It's like, well, because you had that drink. And that one drink was 350 calories, and that handful of fries was 120. Like you're all of a sudden in a 400 calorie surplus that day without even realizing it because you didn't track it and you didn't put it down, and then you're telling yourself this lie that I just can't lose weight. It's impossible for me. I need Ozempic. I need this pill that's just going to help me because like my genetics won't let me lose weight. It's just like it's just not true. It's not true. You got to put in the work. So. My like first thing I tell people is just like, and I'm no nutritionist, I'm not a health coach, I'm not a fitness coach, but everybody asks my advice on it because they saw like the results that I got. It's like, do that first. Just be willing to be brutally honest with yourself for 30 days. And then you'll see where you're going wrong. And by the way, you can eliminate the things first that you don't really care about. Yeah. That was the thing that I realized. It was like, wow, I don't even really care about drinking that drink.
Right.
Like, I can eliminate fruit juice from my life tomorrow and not really give two shits. But that cup of juice was 350 calories. That's insane.
Juice is like a killer.
That's like chicken breast. That's like a whole chicken breast. You know what I mean? That's like 45 calories of protein or grams of protein that I could have consumed, but I drank it in 17 seconds. You know what I mean? Like you'll find some pieces that you're like, I don't really care about that. Yeah. Why am I like, I'm making myself be overweight because I'm like doing this thing that's not even something that I like to do. So I just adjusted the things that I was having, like taking calories from. It was like, you know what? That doesn't matter to me, but like, I would like to every once in a while have an ice cream cone. It's like, I would rather have my bad calories from that ice cream cone than drink this cup of fruit juice or whatever that is for you. But like, you will not get the answer unless you're willing to first be like brutally honest with where you are and what you're currently doing.
I think that's an incredible first piece of advice that more nutritionists should give. The honesty and accountability. A survey study was done once that found the subjects in this study underreported their caloric intake on average by 50%.
Jeez.
That is a massive. Now I'm no mathematician. I went to school for sales, not math, but that means the average person, I think this was a survey of females, the average woman said they ate 2,000 calories a day. They were actually eating 3,000. Wow. And they found that when they observed their caloric intake and had them track. And so getting fit is not about suffering. It's about raising your awareness. A lot of people are unaware. The nutrition label's on the back of everything that we have and consume, and yet so many people are totally clinically unaware of the impact it has. And so I've seen obese people drop 15 pounds from cutting soda or cutting juice because of the caloric impact of that. And so if we pair that with raising our awareness, we can get to that brutal honesty and that truth and that accountability quicker. And the quicker you can get to the truth, the quicker you can change your life. The truth will set you free, but first it'll piss you off. It's a great quote from one of my best friends, Gabriel Pinto. He's a life coach in Atlanta. And it is a fact that you'll get mad when you're like, I've been eating 4,000 calories for 10 years and been wondering why I'm gaining 50 pounds a year. Right. No shit. Yeah. Welcome to it. And the cycle of the psychological competence principle of we move from unconscious incompetence, which means we don't know what we don't know, to conscious incompetence. Oh, I now know I'm eating too many calories. To conscious competence, well, I'm having to track and weigh and it's a little uncomfortable, but I'm figuring it out. To unconscious competence, which is where the pros are. The pros are in a state of flow, if you will. LeBron James doesn't think about how he has to play basketball or shoot a layup. He just does it. Right. He's unconsciously competent. And if you stick with a task for 6 months, you can get to the point where you and I can probably go out to eat all week for every meal and have a general idea of where we are calorically.
You can eyeball the plate of food and make a pretty good educated guess on where you are.
That's it. But you have to do that work first. You have to first track every damn bite you put in your mouth. Yeah. It's just, in my opinion, a non-negotiable, even if it's for a month. Right. Do it and your life will be forever changed.
Yeah, it's literally this, on my other show, it's Travis Makes Money, and we talk about the same thing over there. It's like you just don't realize where the money's going. That's the problem, is you've never taken account, you've never actually looked line item, like by item on your monthly expenses and been like, I spent how much eating out? I spent how much randomly on Amazon stuff that I didn't need? Like, well, there's the money. It's right there. You know what I mean? It's not just magically vanishing. You're not just magically getting fatter. You know what I mean? Like it's
some people think they are.
I was going to say there's a very, very, very small segment of the population that have a real thyroid problem or something like that, where like they need some clinical help. Mm-hmm. That's a much smaller group than most people who would identify in that group. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I recently got attacked by the PCOS community because I put out a intentionally hyperbolic video. It was meant to be humorous. It was not received humorous by everybody. And a few really, really substantial PCOS creators attacked me for it. Yeah. And some of which are great creators who I like, and others who I think prey on women and their emotion around their illness and ailment. And do those things like PCOS and thyroid conditions have an impact on your caloric output, your food? Absolutely. They have an impact, but they don't change the rules of the game. Yeah. And that's what I said in a fewer, more humorous words. I said, you don't have a thyroid problem, you have an elbow problem. Every time your elbow bends, your mouth opens. And that got some laughs. But for every one person who was pissed that, no, you are a hater of women or you don't acknowledge disease, there was a woman who said, I have PCOS and Hashimoto's and I've lost 50 pounds tracking my calories. You're right. It's about getting to the truth that will set you free, but first it'll piss you off. And that's what was happening. So you're right. Those people exist and they actually are impacted. But relative to the average person in population, it's a very small amount of people. Very small.
Yeah. What do you think is like some of the more like rabid pieces of misinformation that you've seen kind of floating around TikTok and the broader, internets?
How long do you have? I think the demonization of a food group is wild. I think it promotes disordered eating and full-blown eating disorders, dare I say, in people. I think the demonization of vegetables and carbohydrates, there was a thing in there that Dr. John said where he said carbohydrates are causing depression. Again, not true. But you could argue that a lot of, in the example he used was cookies, cakes, right? We need to understand that people aren't addicted to carbohydrates. They're addicted to the combination of carbohydrates and fat. That creates an environment for hyperpalatability. Think about your favorite junk food. If it's a potato chip, that is a corn chips fried in oil. If you want to be full really fast, eat boiled potatoes plain. If you want to eat a lot of boiled potatoes, cover them in cheese and sour cream. The combination of fat and carbohydrate creates hyperpalatability and a lack of satiety. It overloads our dopamine receptors. And they have engineers that work on this stuff to leave just the right amount of dust on the Dorito, just the right amount of chocolate in the Oreo so that you go back in.
Make sure you keep dipping in, yeah.
Yes. So the demonization of processed food, I can get behind. Absolutely limit that for your mental health, your organ health, your physical health, your body composition. But, sweet potatoes aren't going to make me depressed.
Blueberries, probably not.
I could eat blueberries until I'm blue in the face and probably not gain a lot of weight. Yeah. So it's the absolute take of, I think there needs to be an attack on processed food and hypercaloric food and food engineering. Yeah. But the truth is I've gotten shredded eating potatoes and rice and cereal even because I tracked my caloric intake. So the demonization of a certain food group is, I think, rampant. I think that probably the how do I say this in a way that's tender, love, and caring? I can't. The victimization of women with certain illnesses, as I alluded to earlier, they are being preyed on by some of these doctors and gurus and creators that, oh, you're broken. I have a female creator who's an internet friend of mine. Her name is Beth Farraco. Shout out Beth. She's a huge creator. And she says the wave of female creators telling women they're broken, you have PCOS, you're broken, you don't work right, buy my product, it's a problem. You're telling people they're defective. And so I think leveraging people's illnesses as being the reason they can't lose weight rather than a lack of accountability, and the demonization of one particular food, whether it be people are saying too much protein's bad, too much fat is bad, too many carbs is bad. That's just not true. Again, we exist somewhere in the middle, but you can't package that and sell it.
Yeah.
And so it's not sexy advice. And it's honestly why some days I wake up and I'm like, why are these people listening to me?
Yeah.
I'm not saying anything crazy. My takes are actually boring if you take out my hyperbolic humor.
Yeah.
And so those are probably the two that I'm seeing the most in my algorithm.
Yeah. And I see a lot of people too with the blind trust of the traditional system that's just not meant to keep us healthy. Yeah. Can you speak to that at all? FDA and pharmaceuticals and trusting somebody just because they have an MD at the end of their name?
Did you happen to catch the Hims and Hers Super Bowl commercial?
I don't think so.
I made a video about it and it went very viral. It was all over, this topic was all over my algorithm. Great point. The lack of attention to lifestyle and habits versus the focus and prioritization on medication is wild. Now, I'm not sitting here telling you that I'm against Ozempic or GLP-1s. I think there are people that probably would benefit from it because they might die if they don't have medical intervention. They're
in an emergency state.
300 pounds overweight. They have deep-rooted traumas that maybe cause them to use food as a vice. You still have to treat that root cause. But GLP-1s can save people's lives. Now, we're starting to see some potential adverse side effects from GLP-1s, but my opinion, independent. The reason I bring up that commercial is the Hims and Hers commercial made this absolute banger of a Super Bowl ad talking about how Big Pharma is using drugs and narratives and processed foods to keep us sick. They talk about how 55% of the U.S. is obese, how 160,000 people a year die from obese-related conditions. And I'm like, I'm on board. What are they about to pitch? Come buy grass-fed beef and rice and come walk with us?
Yeah.
And then they go, oh, and by the way, we sell Ozempic and it's cheaper. And I'm like, oh, fuck, you were almost there. You were so close.
Yeah.
And so it's this, not a demonization, but a complete disregard for habitual changes because I can't sell you walking. I can't sell you protein.
It's all free.
Right.
Yeah,
it's all
sunlight's free.
Sunlight's free, baby. And it's the best thing you do for your mental health. And
right.
It was a really great, ironic, dystopian example of how far we've gotten from the truth, which is, I'm going to show you what's wrong with Big Pharma and then tell you I'm a part of Big Pharma, but I'm cheaper. So come buy my GLP-1s that, by the way, have no regulation on them. It's crazy they can sell it. Point being, I think pharmaceuticals save lives. I think the invention of the antibiotic is incredible. And I think we need modern medicine for acute injury.
Yeah.
But, you know, in January of this year, I lost my father. And thank you. He was my best friend. And he just got sicker and sicker and sicker. And we never really knew what was happening. He had a lot of symptoms. He had fatigue, muscle wasting, and from the time we realized something was wrong to the time he passed, January 19th of this year, was about 7 months.
Wow.
And I got to watch someone I so deeply loved, cared for, and respected. I mean, he was my best friend. We had a special bond. And it ended up him being, my hero to me being his caretaker. And it's part of why I'm so devoted to this lifestyle, because I know, he was my best friend and an incredible man, but he didn't pay a lick of attention to his lifestyle. He smoked, he ate whatever he wanted. He was never overweight, but when you smoke for 60 years, you don't prioritize whole foods, something can go wrong in here.
Yeah.
And we think it was a form of cancer that created the symptoms that ultimately took him. But there was no mention from these doctors about any lifestyle intervention, anything we could do to even make his life better or more comfortable at the beginning when we didn't even know what he had.
Yeah.
And I got to see firsthand that we are not patients, we are customers.
Yeah.
I asked his gastroenterologist, how many patients do you have? He said, thousands. And I said, how the hell could I even expect you to give me quality care? This isn't your fault. This is the system's fault. And there is no money in telling people to get out and take care of themselves, because then you're not making money off of me. You're not making a doctor any money or Pfizer any money because you take care of yourself. And because that can't be monetized, and we ultimately live in a capitalistic society, which enables us to do beautiful things like this, and I'm very grateful for it, it comes at the expense of people's health, but it means we bear the responsibility of learning for ourselves and being a critical thinker to take our health into our own hands. Because I learned throughout that process of Going from my dad's son to the guy that feeds him, bathes him, takes him to doctor's appointments, I learned a lot about humility and true love. And I'm honestly grateful that I experienced that. And I think it's part of my story. And it helps me tell people how important this really is to take care of yourself, because everybody has a laundry list of problems until they have a health problem. And then there is just one problem. Nothing else matters. And I've seen it intimately. And so it is ultimately our responsibility to do the research, to do the trial and error, because none of these pharmaceutical companies are coming to save you. They're going to give you a pill that might help. It might put a Band-Aid on the gunshot wound, but it ain't stitching up the wound. Right. And that is a huge problem that I don't think we'll ever fix or see. And so it ultimately comes down to radical responsibility and extreme ownership of one's own life.
How old was your dad?
He was 71.
71. Yeah, man, it's one of those things that I like when I look into the future and I ask myself the question, what are we doing now that in a couple hundred years they're going to look back on and go like, can't believe those morons in 2025 were doing this all the time, right? Because like
we
have a tendency to romanticize the time that we live in. And by the way, we live in the best time ever. In terms of...
And it's not close.
Yeah, in terms of information availability and your ability to take control, to gain knowledge, to have success in life. Like we live in a pretty awesome time. But that does not mean that we're correct about everything. Yeah. And there's going to be, there's obviously some things that we're going to look back on and be like, I can't believe people were just walking around. And I think the pharmaceutical industry and the blind trust and loyalty to MDs is going to be one of those things that we look back on and go like, remember when they used to just like eat this stuff? You know what I mean? Like that was crazy. I can't believe those people were doing that.
Yeah.
And you know, it speaks to that issue a lot, man. When we see this, you know, with our generation, because for all intents and purposes, like our parents' generation and their parents' generation gained a lot from Western medicine. And there were massive leaps in life expectancy and things like that in the last 150 years, largely due to Western medicine. And I'm not one of those people that vilifies everything from Western medicine. You know, if I need surgery, like, yeah, I'm going to go to a qualified surgeon. I'm not going to go to my holistic health doctor and ask him to cut me open. You know what I mean? So like they both have a place, but everybody tends to just fight each other instead of ask each other, what can we do to help each other solve the problem more effectively?
Yeah.
And it's always a combination. There's always like some pieces of this that you can take and some pieces of this that you can take, but full circle, it means that you are going to have to put in a little bit of work to figure out what combination of those things is going to be the best thing for you.
And I think that's the bigger message that anyone listening could take from this, is that in all things in life, everybody knows something you don't. We keep saying it. It is Western medicine. There was a time where if you got a compound fracture or a gash in your leg, you could die. And now we have antibiotics. Thank God.
Yeah.
Or thank Western God and Western medicine.
Yeah.
And so it absolutely has its place. But the average medical doctor, don't quote me exactly on this, but I'm 95% close. The average medical doctor through 12 years of schooling, because that's the average length of undergrad to medical residency into an MD, gets about, I think, 8 to 10 hours of nutritional training. 8 to 10 hours over 12 years, you can't expect that person to be an expert. I mean, I'll never forget the day we thought my father had cirrhosis. It was a misdiagnosis, but we thought he had cirrhosis of the liver. They were confused. My dad didn't drink. And the first thing the doctor said was high protein diet, because cirrhosis causes muscle wasting. He was gaunt. He was losing weight quickly. And he said, your dad needs at least 70 grams of protein a day. And I went, are you fucking kidding me? 70 grams for a guy with muscle wasting? And we know that that's the RDA minimum to not be considered protein deficient. But for a guy with muscle wasting, or for you, if you're resistance training, I train twice a day sometimes. I'm on High Rocks prep right now. The majority of my year is that 3 times a week walking, but right now I'm prepping for a fitness race. And the heavy lifting, the running, if I were to eat the RDA minimum of protein a day, I would waste away. I would always be hungry. I would be fatter. And so you take a guy who's dying from a muscle wasting disease and you tell me he needs the minimum amount of protein, how up to date are you on literature? And to that point, Dr. Peter Attia, who's an incredible authority in the space, put out a stat once that said something to the effect of, from the time a cutting edge study hits the table and we know about it to the time it's in modern medical textbooks is about 10 years.
Oh my gosh.
So these guys are learning nutritional information from 2010 and still referencing it. A lot has fucking changed.
Yeah.
And so you have to stay on the edge of discernment and self-starterism and ownership and accountability if you really want to know what's happening. I mean, there's a time where we thought cigarettes were healthy. And here we are now. That's obviously changed. So yeah, man, the Western medicine, absolutely has a place for breaks and injuries, car crashes and antibiotics, but it is not where you want to go if you want to live longer and live a quality life longer.
Yeah, that's one of those books I recommend to every single person is Outlive by Peter Attia. Yeah,
and his podcast, The Drive, is incredible.
It should be required reading, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. Atomic Habits, Outlive, and maybe The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck. Figure out what you want to learn from a lot of that.
Right. Well, listen, dude, this has been a lot of fun. I got to close on a friendship question because this is the Travis Makes Friends podcast. I'm convinced that the number one biohack is friendship, community. If you look at all the blue zones, that's one of the commonalities is they all have a strong sense of community. Some of them, by the way, smoke cigarettes their whole life and still live to be 104. Highest concentration of centenarians in the world are in these blue zones. But one of the things they have is a very, very strong sense of community. How do you go about furthering, deepening, strengthening the friendships that you have in your life?
What a fantastic question, man. I heard someone say once, if you're not happy with where you're at in your current relationships in life, start to embody your lifestyle, start to live a certain way, and you emit what you attract, and you will find your way into the right groups of people. And I made a radical change in my life about a year ago. I had always been into fitness, but it was a very isolated journey. I was doing all of it alone. And I immersed myself into a run club that a friend started and have since amassed 50 new best friends. And we do things together. We bond through physical training.
You torture yourself together. Yeah.
Yes. I mean, I've run ultras with these people. I've run 20 miles with my friends. And there's a true camaraderie that comes through suffering. I mean, you know this through sport, right? Your closest friends are when you're out there battling.
I've done a couple
together.
ultras with a couple guys.
There you go.
Yeah, it's that same way. Like whenever you see them, it's like, we know, you know what I mean?
Yeah. So if you want to deepen relationships with people, what I've found in my experience is I love to go out and celebrate with my friends and drink and be, mid-20s guys. That's a blast. But doing shit that matters together, talking about things as men that might be uncomfortable or vulnerable is where I built deep connections with my friends. Suffering together physically. If you're not happy with who you're around or who you're with or who you're not with, figure out what your ideal lifestyle looks like. From a health standpoint, a religious standpoint, if that's what you're into, and then get into uncomfortable things. Put yourself out there. Everything you want is on the other side of some uncomfortable conversation, act, or activity or gathering. And every time I've done that, God has put the right people in my life. And now, looking back a year ago, I've still got my core group of people, but I've got all these new best friends that I know I could call if I was in a jam, and we all live the same way, and it's just a seamless symbiotic existence, and it changed my life. So pour into what you want more of, and more will be returned to you.
Dude, perfect way to end the conversation, man. Thanks for doing this. Where can people go to get more from you?
Yeah, Michael Smoak on social media, but the username is Higher Up Wellness on all platforms, TikTok, Instagram, YouTube. I have a podcast as well, the Higher Up Podcast on Spotify, Apple, and YouTube. And I believe that's it. And if you're interested in working with me a little more, you can always shoot me a message on Instagram and see if we're fit to work together.
Higher Up Wellness. Go check out some of the stuff that Michael's putting out there. Like I said, I don't recommend a ton of nutrition advice givers out there, but Michael's definitely one of them. You will not regret going over there and consuming some of the stuff that he's putting out. Remember, for everybody listening, to leave every relationship better than you found it. We'll catch you on the next episode. Peace out.